You're listening to Get More Done. I'm your host, Ben Dugavich. Each episode, we will talk with folks from different industries and learn how they manage their day, help their customers or teams do more with less, use automation, and generally get more done. On this episode, I caught up with Shauna Vassell, a business growth strategist. Her company Concave helps business owners and creatives get into the CEO mindset to scale their offerings. We talk about the challenges with delegation and the power of time blocking. Enjoy. Excellent. Welcome back to Get More Done, the podcast all about productivity and crushing of goals and getting more stuff done. On today's episode, I'm joined with Shauna Vassell, the business growth strategist. So Shauna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ben. Great to be here.
Yeah, super pumped to have you on. So what you might not know is we usually start these conversations with an icebreaker just to break up the nerves and get everybody a bit more comfortable. So with that icebreaker question, this episode is, what's the best gift you have ever been given and why was it the best?
So the best gift that I was ever given was, I would say it's a leadership conference that one of the retired managers that I had gifted to me back in the day. And the reason why it was the best gift was it was the reason why I decided to move my business the way it is, and I decided to jump in headfirst into leadership development as well as helping business owners because at the time when he gave it to me, it really was not something that he was allowed to give. It was like his retirement gift, and then he just kind of disappeared. And then he sent me a letter and said, oh, by the way, go to so-and-so and go pick up this ticket that I paid for you to go to this women conference because I think you're going to be amazing in the future. And that was it. That was his parting gift. He just literally put it on the company card and just said, yeah, so go to the reception. She has it. And I think you're going to be fantastic. Good luck. See you on the other side or whenever we run into each other. And that was it. That was the best gift ever because I ran into so many female entrepreneurs, so many leaders, and it really just kind of changed my direction.
Wow, that is an amazing gift. You're like, here's the foundation for your whole new life, and see you later, I guess. That's awesome.
Exactly. It was such a sweet gift that he gave. And I know right now he's somewhere, he definitely moved away he's in the bushes, I always say, somewhere, because he plays guitar. He loves nature. So he had said that's what he was going to do. So he was off the grid. So before he left, he just kind of just gifted it. And then he just see you guys. That was it.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I don't think I've ever gotten anything that great, but I'm still hoping, still time. Former managers out there. No, just kidding. So tell us a little bit, what that leadership, foundation, meant for you as far as how that helps you now, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with that knowledge now.
So that leadership gift, I think it's paid itself so many times forward. So right now what I do is I'm, like you said, a business growth strategist. So I work with coaches and creatives to help them to get out of the daily grind and to focus on revenue generating activities that's going to help them in their business and to help them grow and scale their business. So as part of what I do, I add a lot of leadership components to that because the big transition for a lot of people is, how do I go from being a solopreneur doing everything into a true CEO of a business? And when I think back on how that's changed me, so during that time, I was actually in a bigger corporation when I received that gift, and that gift actually gave me the knowledge that I needed to do more intentional career development. And that led me into going into more strategic planning, going into program design, service delivery, and implementation. And I did that in a public sector experience as well as an independent consultant where I did organizational change management. And if you're not familiar what that is, it's literally if someone goes off on a strategic plan and they said, oh, we're going to create this thing and we're going to take this technology and implement it here. And then you come in and do a risk assessment of, does that make sense? Is it going to impact the organization when you do the operations? And what does that look like at the end? And that was what I was doing. And I was giving them, kind of recommendations as to the best way to implement that from a change perspective.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Because I know that, that's a lot of moving parts that you have to be involved in. And now you're guiding people through that. So as you're helping your clients, what are some ways you're, leveraging to help them do more with less? Like you talked about, getting them out of working in the business, but working on the business. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So as I mentioned, it's when you're the clients that I get. So a lot of times, if I take like a creative, for instance, they're in the process of freelance, right? And a lot of times it's like gig after gig after gig, and it's really focused mainly on the delivery side of their business. So a lot of the business development side of it, where they're focused on, the marketing, the sales, the operations, all those pieces kind of take second place. So I really help them to kind of take that step back and look at how can I streamline my business. But first we look at the offers that they have, because in order for them to have more time, they really have to look at what are you selling in the first place, and can you replicate yourself or make it more efficient. And then once we do that, we look at how do we streamline, how do we automate that. And then once we look at that, then we look at who do you need to bring on to help you moving forward, because the idea is you're building a business. You shouldn't just be in it every single time. And that's going through stages. But in terms of, that's what we look at in terms of getting them to do more with less. It's a lot on what do you need to do and what don't you need to do? And how can we delegate? How can we build a team? And how can we automate?
Yeah. And I think tying it back into how do you make money and how can you make more of that with less time? Like that's the foundation. That's the fundamental stuff. That's awesome. Yeah. So in your past working with folks on the automation side, have there been any big wins that, that you've seen of taking somebody from, no automation to somebody that got it all figured out? Like what would that look like?
So there's been a ton of that, because a lot of people come when they're literally writing notes on note papers. There's like notebooks everywhere. It's like, oh, I was planning to do that. It's all in my head. I know what needs to be done. And, what I generally do is get them to take it out of their head. So, and that's not necessarily what I'm not physically doing it for them, but I'm getting them to think about, what do you need someone else to do, and take it out of your head, because a lot of that is what's holding them back, because they become the bottlenecks, right? And, you can't really, and it was fascinating to me, because I actually had one of my clients before we met, she didn't have even a simple scheduling system. And I said, wait a minute, what's going on? So I calculated how much her hourly rate was. And I said, if you do this with every single client, this is how much it's going to cost you, because you're responding to me and giving me your time slots. And then by the time we connect again, there's time slots gone. And then you're going back and forth. And I'm like, this is so simple. Okay, let's stop this right now. So, just like the little steps, because a lot of people don't like the technology, because it's like, oh my God, I just don't want to do it. This is just too much. And then they realize, interesting. So you mean the email went out without me actually doing anything? Yes. Oh, so does the paper, does something happen with the spreadsheet once it's done and now my accountant could just grab it? Yes, that happens too. So, it's just those little wins that I think a lot of people didn't realize was there. And I've done that in a couple of instances, but that's just one example, or, one example rolled into a couple of things as to how that actually helps them.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people may be reluctant. You would say automation. You're like, well, I don't want computers to be running everything. But then you're like, your time is more valuable spent on the core of what where your excellence is. Or like you said, those revenue driving metrics. So that makes total sense. And we know a thing or two about scheduling, because that's what our whole platform is. It saves people time every day. So that's really, really great. I've heard you talk a little bit about how you help your clients, most importantly, like avoid burnout, right? Because if they're solopreneurs and they're one person wearing so many hats, what are some signs of burnout, or like what should people be watching out for?
So I always say when it comes to burnout, you have to watch your energy. So a lot of times you're going to start seeing the signs through how you feel. So a lot of your energy. So, one of the examples, so when you think of burnout, it's really just stress over a prolonged period of time. And running a business is stressful. Like, we're not going to beat around that. It is stressful. So it's a matter of, if you've had that continuous stress over a period of time and have not slowed down, have not reset or recharged, some people think, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. No, you probably will die.
Right.
You really have to think about, looking at it from your energy perspective, because you start seeing it. And what you start noticing is you're either on one end where you're completely snappy and you're just like, you're just not a good person to be around most of the time. And, or you go on the opposite end where you're procrastinating. And, I see this with a lot of my creative friends where it's like, oh, I can't get it done the way that I want it to look or do it the way that I want to. So I'm just going to go to sleep. I just can't. It's, and it's like, by doing that, it's also a sign of burnout too, because your perfectionism is kicking in. There's so many things to that, right? So it's just really just gauging your energy and looking at whether or not it's still in flow, like it's still in a good flow, or if it's a little off. Because if it becomes a little choppy and you're kind of snappy, or just like more withdrawn, that's a clear sign that it's burnout. That you just need to start looking at it, and maybe you need to reset and just fill the cup again.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about what that reset would look like, or what maybe you recommend for your clients and folks in that situation when they feel the water's getting a little choppy and like, I'm becoming not my best self here. How do I hit that reset button?
So the thing is, it looks different for different people, right? And I think, one size doesn't fit all with this, but I definitely think you really have to start looking at what it is that brings you joy, that brings you that fulfillment. And, self-care routine can look like it's not just a bubble bath, right? Some people think, oh, let me just do that. That's not necessarily what it is all the time, but it is really it can help you de-stress, but also just going crazy on your Peloton or something could work too. But it really does depend on what kind of motivates you and what kind of gives you energy. So, for me, going on hiking trails is one of the things that we do here. So it's like, okay, people are in bad moods. Okay, let's leave, change the scenery. And a lot of times that's what works. And I think from, a more general standpoint, it's all about changing that scenery and turning things off and walking away from it.
Yep. Step away, recharge, get the blood pumping. Absolutely. Now,
Yes.
You spend a lot of time helping other people build their businesses, but let's talk a little bit about maybe some challenges that you've ran through personally that you've had to deal with by building your own company. Any major things you've uncovered or learned as you're building your own company up?
So I think there's so many, but I'll stick to one. In terms of challenges, I think the biggest one was the mindset work. And, it's kind of such a blanket, and now it's so overused in terms of what people say it is. But it really is the ability to understand from your own inner work. Like, I'm going to say from my standpoint, my inner work, I didn't know there was so much head trash. Let's just say that. Until I got into my business and I realized, oh, so money mindset is an issue. Okay, so I don't, asking for the price was going to be a problem in the sales conversation. I didn't even think about that. But it makes sense if I thought about my corporate career and I thought about the transition of it and how much I got paid and, how little I negotiated, right? And it just kind of put those things in perspective, but it also put it into perspective of, sometimes you think, and when I went in there, I was like, so much, but you still fall in the trap of following the gurus. And that was one of the things that really threw me for a loop, because in my own inner work was off kilter, in the sense that I was not paying attention to what I needed and what I was doing with my business, instead of trying to compare myself to someone else's business. And I think that was the major thing for me when I started, because I realized, wait a second, you can have all the technical skills in the world, but if you are not grounded in what you believe is the right thing to do next, you're going to always be chasing someone else's shadow, right? And you're still number two. You're never going to be their number one, right? So that was the major thing for me.
Wow. Having your own determination to get it done, and, learning from others, but not idolizing them or, living in that lack. I think, that's cool. And like you said, getting that mental trash, because there's so many thoughts that just will come in and derail you, and you have to stay convicted. Right. Yeah. That's so awesome. Now, you've talked about a proprietary framework that you built to help your clients up with this 9-step framework. Now, are you able to give us some Cliff Note version of that without giving too much away? Because, obviously we want to keep trade secrets, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about your framework of how you help folks scale up and do things differently.
Yeah, no, I absolutely can share kind of the overview of what gets done. In terms of the details, that's where the proprietary pieces come in. But a lot of what I do with my clients is it's really about, we break it into 3 different phases, because a lot of times people come in and they have there's a magic pill solution to it. And there's so much more to unpack with the business. So when you break it out, we do the first phase, which is really just kind of defining the foundations of where we're going. And once we do that, there's 3 different pillars within that piece that really looks at where exactly are you? Because a lot of people think, okay, well, if you're just in a startup mode, it means that you're probably here because you don't have this revenue or you don't have that. But there's more layers to that, because people have strengths in different areas. And if you really peel back the layers, you're going to see, it's almost like if you were to look at it from even a bell curve, you'll start seeing where they've spent a lot more of their effort versus somewhere else. And then you can start looking at, okay, well, sure, they might have similarities, but they're going to be different. So let's define the foundation first, and then let's look at what needs to be done. Then when that's done, then we look at, okay, let's look at where do we need to streamline. And that's the second phase of that. And that's another 3 pillars that we focus on. And within that, it's again, going back to what I was saying, where we look at where do you need to take yourself out of it? Because the whole premise of all of this is taking you out of the grind and focusing on what you need to do to grow your business. And that's where the streamlining come in. And these things take time. So it's not a one and done. And that's why I said to people, when you hear 10K in 10 days, you have to remember, you have to have an infrastructure beforehand to get to that space. And it's not just a one and done that way. And, if you fall for it, it's because you yourself don't even know where you're starting from. And so your foundation is weak there, just even from a leadership perspective as well. So a lot of people that say, oh, well, I paid for this thing. You knew you should have known better. So it's that streamline. So that's why we look at the streamline, because there's a lot of pieces where again, going back to the headspace, a lot of people have a lot of things written in notebooks or in their head. And they think that, oh, well, it's pretty easy. I could do it. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is so you don't have to do it. Everything should be repeatable, reproducible, so that you can always hand it off. Because eventually the idea is you are going to start thinking like a CEO. And how do you do that? You clear the space. So once we do that streamline, then we move into scaling. And that's where we focus mainly on the areas that actually will bring in the revenues. So, it depends on where that person is. We might get there faster. We don't turn off anything that's working. We just mostly do it in the background. So things are going in parallel. So we start building things. And the reason why I call it scale versus grow, because when you're trying to grow your business, it's always more money because you're bringing on more people, you're doing all this stuff. When you're scaling, you're looking for that lean strategy to it, right? So that lean approach where it's about continuous improvement and optimizing what you have in place and working with that first, and then reinvest in to then grow, because that's more sustainable. So that's what that is.
Yeah, that sounds really comprehensive. And I love the starting the foundation. And like you said, just what do you need to do? What's happening? And I think a lot of people want that silver bullet or want that magic pill, but that's not how anything works. Like maybe Jack and his beanstalk, like the fairy tale side of things, but it takes that determination and that grit and really uncovering that. And then the difference that you mentioned of that growth versus scales, like growth is like, yeah, you can grow bigger, but if you're not optimized and it's not a lean process, like you mentioned, then it's like, what's the point? You're just funneling more money and just burning it onto this pile instead of just growing revenue. That's really, really awesome. Now, with all of the folks that you have worked with, what have been the, something that they've struggled with the most, that you've seen across the board, and, how could folks avoid that?
So the thing that I've seen a lot is trying to do everything. it's a gift and a curse when you're thinking of the multitasking perspective. And with an entrepreneur, sometimes you just don't have the budget to do anything else. But it still boils down to if you're trying to do everything at the same time, you're definitely on a one-way trip to burnout, 100%. The other piece of that is you're never going to be 100% in anything, and it's going to show up in the place that you don't want it to show up. And that's what usually happens when you see a lot of people, like they're doing Instagram reels and all these things. And, it's like, okay, well, you're heavy on the marketing. I can see that, but who's your customer? Who's coming? Is it the bunch of people who like to watch you dance, or what? It's really just thinking about what exactly are you focused on, and trying to do everything really funnels back into that. And that's why we, in the first stage, it's like we do a complete deep dive into, okay, well, where's your time being spent? Because we need to understand that, because once we get a good layout and map of your time, we can start looking at, okay, well, does it make sense what you're doing? And if it doesn't, how do we shift it? And that's what I see. So that's why when I work with people, I generally do that time management piece where we really take that mapping of what's going on and then start there.
Yeah. Totally. And I think there's an old saying, like, if you try to catch two rabbits, you won't catch either of them, right? Like, you got to pick one and stick with it. Now, since there's only so much time in the day, and we talked a bit about time management, how are you seeing these business owners delegate effectively? And where does that usually start? Because I could imagine if somebody's timid on automation, they're probably very timid on delegating and passing off the buck, right? So how do you approach those conversations?
So delegation is very interesting, because a lot of people, you have the people who are, I have a long list of to-dos. I can't wait to hire somebody. And, when that person comes on, it's like they literally run for the hills, because they're like, wait a second, you needed 5 people. You didn't need just me. Or it's like I don't know what to give them. It's that conversation around, what should I give them? What do I do? And, it's, you have like different spectrums. So it's like, or you have when you have those people, like the one that doesn't know what to do, it's usually, okay, well, we do that time study, but we look at, okay, well, what exactly do you have in place? What kind of process do you have? Do you have any? And, we start off there, because if you have no process, then the focus isn't about finding someone. The focus is finding out, what do you need done? And it's not just, well, it would be nice to have someone manage my inbox. What do you need them to do in your inbox? Be a bit more specific. And that comes from a lot more conversations, right? And it's important to do that in advance of hiring somebody, because you're definitely going to waste money doing that if you go in and expect them to know what's in your head, because miraculously they're going to just know, right? And the other person, which is like, like I said, they literally just like throw everything and say, I know exactly what I want. So I want you to go in and there's a Trello board already there and this is there and that's there. So just do what you're supposed to do. And they walk away. And, when it comes to delegation, you can't abdicate. You really have to be involved. And a lot of people, especially with tech, they're like, throw it over the fence. I don't want to know what you do. Just do it. But you really have to understand what it is that they're doing, because when something's broken, you have to understand who do you need to talk to and where do you need them to go, because you're going to chase tails, especially if you're doing like launches or if you have a lot of money on the table. Because I remember there was one client where the issue was there wasn't a connection to the payment, and people were going and it was falling off. But the only way that she could figure that out is if she actually understood her metrics, and she didn't understand the metrics. And she's like, well, I don't know, it's working. So I said, but you didn't test it, did you? And she's like, well, I'm not supposed to do that. Who's supposed to do that? And I said, well, so who's doing it? So it's like conversations like that where it could really save you a lot if you really understood what was supposed to happen in any given situation, and what some of the triggers that you can see to tell whether it's firing off or not, right? And I think that's the part that's important. So with delegation, I always think that you need to understand what needs to be done. You need to have a clear picture of what you expect of that person and actually communicate it. And then be able to not just walk away from it. You have to be able to support that person, coach that person, and train them if they need it. Because a lot of people say, well, they're contractors, there should be experts. It's kind of like I always say to them, that's like when you buy a car, they all do the same things. They go from point A to point B. There's a place for you to get into the car. There's a place for you to get out. You can drive the car, whether it's driverless or whatever, but it all does the same functions. But the features are different. So they need to understand your business features. So are you doing that? Are you helping them to understand that? And if you aren't doing that, then if they walk away from your business, then that's because you really didn't do your job. You had one job. So yeah. That's how I deal with it. So I have hard conversations because delegation is really around, and some people really treat it like, it's like a breakup, like the last person left, and I just want to deal with it. It's just too stressful. And it's not the conversation about, okay, well, let's talk about why. How can we fix that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that option of getting delegation to help save time and even automation too, it's just going to highlight process inefficiencies if those aren't already in place. So it's not like this is going to solve it. It's like, it's just going to amplify whatever you have in place. So it's going to really shine the light on that, right?
Exactly, 100%. But if they are not even taking that first step, it's really hard for them to even see the forest behind the trees too, right? So.
Yeah. And it's still being involved, having one hand in it, and not just, I'm going to go sit on the beach while everybody else does the work. I mean, eventually you want to get to that point, but you got to build the systems and get people in place and help them do their great work. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So what's one tip or maybe a couple tips that you could give some business owners or managers to just help them be more productive? Because we did talk about like the scheduling aspect and a bit of automation, but are there any other things that you suggest for folks to test out, maybe some low-hanging fruit that they could change or do?
So productivity is, I think it's, as much as we can assign a lot of tools to help you, but it really it's going back to the same thing with self-care. It's really about your individual style, your lifestyle. When it comes to productivity, you have to look at, again, your energy. So if you are more of a morning person, then you need to really adjust your schedule based on your peak times, because that's when you're going to be the most productive. And if you know that you are constantly in and out of your workspace, you have to think about what days you can block. And I think time blocking is super important, because that's when you have to think about how much time do you need and when. because you have to look at those energy shifts that you're going to have. Because if you concentrate only in the mornings, but you know that on Mondays and Wednesdays you have, you know, people going back and forth, you're never going to concentrate. So you need to like not use those times to do specific types of work. So you need to block them based on your energy, your lifestyle, and then you also need to look at, you need to actually estimate your time. And I say this because a lot of people do not, you know, time blocking is great. And you can say, oh, I'm going to do this for an hour, but you really have to start tracking how much time it takes you. And the reason why I said it's a good practice to do that, because when you start looking at handing things off to people, you're also looking at tracking how much efficiencies that you're having in your own profit, in your own business. Because the fact that you're no longer doing this, you're also looking at, okay, well, what was the savings to me from that standpoint? So because anybody who comes into your business really has to be able to provide an ROI at the end of the day. And if you're not seeing from the time they start, if you're not seeing an upward trend, then that's problematic. You need to probably have some coaching conversation or let them go. But from your standpoint, you need to be able to track how much time do you need to do any given task, and then build your time blocks based on that, because that's going to determine what you can fit in a day and what you can't. And the other part to this, and then I'll close with that, is only do three major things for a day. Like, you can do a lot of little tasks within that, but don't overcommit. The reality of a day of your daily schedule where you're actually productive, it's a lot less than you think. It's a lot less than you think. So you really need to be clear on when you're going to actually be productive. The rest of the time, you're probably just keeping lights on.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, knowing when you're the most productive of that time of the day and blocking the time. And I think the big struggle for a lot of people is just estimating how long a task is going to take and recording that and remembering that, because that's really, really great stuff and powerful to just manage your time a lot better. Now, is there anything that you personally do that is kind of interesting around productivity, you know, when you have to manage all these conversations, manage all these customers and everything that you're working on?
So I'm a big, like I said, I'm a big fan of time blocking. So one of the things that I do for myself, I know I get lost in the sauce on certain things. So whatever I am working on, so I used to do a lot of back office process re-engineering. So sometimes I get lost in the back end of how can I use this to streamline that. So sometimes I do that a lot. So I literally, whenever I have that time block, I have a specific ringer or like alert and some words to it to tell me to get out. It's literally, it's funny, but I won't share it. But but in terms of what I do, I literally have, because for me, one of the things is I have to know, and I think for everybody, you have to know what you really enjoy doing, because it can really take you away from the things that you also need to do. And, you know, if it's delivery work, sometimes you can just stay in delivery and not touch anything else. And you wonder, where did the day go? And that time block doesn't work, right? So you really have to know, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, you know, you always take 2 hours when you're supposed to only take 1. So it's about having that accountability built in, so that you can know, okay, well, normally this is something that I really enjoy, like doing Canva posts or Canva stuff, I need to like really get someone to say, what are you doing? Get up, you know, like that kind of stuff. So I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that flow state of saying, I need somebody to kick me out of that, kind of like Inception, you know, where it's like, get me out of that dream state, pull me back in. But that's really, really useful, because you can get lost in that. And then the day's gone, maybe 2 days, and you're like, whoa, that could have been used more productively or differently. That's really, really great. So what's next for you? What are you excited about?
So I'm actually so coming January, I'm actually launching my group program. So that's coming up. So that's something that is I'm really excited about. Right now, I do a lot of this work one-to-one, and I am excited about expanding it to a bigger audience. So that way I can spend more time with different people, as well as introduce different coaches as well into the program.
Awesome. And where can folks learn a little bit more about like those group sessions and more about everything that you're working on?
So right now we live mainly on Instagram. We do have a Facebook group, so you can definitely reach us through Instagram on the to the Facebook group where we do lives every Thursdays. So if they want to find me, it's at Concave Business. So KONCAVE Business, and that's for both our Instagram and our Facebook as well.
Great. We'll be sure to add that in the show notes so everyone can be on the pulse for January to join these group sessions and just soak up all of your wisdom from your posts and everything. Shauna, it's been great to talk with you and to learn all about everything you're working on. Thanks again for being on Get More Done, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and have an awesome weekend too.
All right, you too.
All right, cheers. Thank you for listening to Get More Done. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be on the show, you can visit getmoredone.youcanbook.me, reach out to us on Twitter at YouCanBookMe, or visit us on the forum, forum.youcanbook.me. I'll catch you on the next episode. Cheers.